This block 4 is about the economic dimension in relation to sustainability. And as regards the economic dimension, I have one big recommendation. And the recommendation is do a little bit of mapping. Mapping is that you make on one piece of paper something visible. Because sustainability is complex, economic issues are complex. If you merge the two, it's even a more complex situation. And there are pros and cons, and you can come up with all kinds of arguments. There is still, even if an organization is already better used to sustainability ideas, somewhere in the background or in the forefront, this distrust, this understream. Is it really good for us? What is us? What is in for our organization? What is in for me? Mapping can make that all clear. Story 12 is the mapping of the roadmap results. We have already discussed the roadmap. We have already seen all these roadmap items, and we have already seen that reporting about roadmap progress is a huge problem, or at least it used to be. Because in the old days, we had this roadmap with the 9 chapters, maybe up to 100 items, maybe with all different kinds of weight factors. And what we did, in fact, in order to evaluate, making each 3 or 6 months a little Dow Jones Sustainability Index out of that and calculating a final percentage. Okay, it was a lot of effort. If it's worth the effort, you should do it. But soon we came to the observation that managers, bosses, who have to swallow all this information do not take the time to read details, these details result. That means when we had seen this, we invented this traffic light system. Remember, with green, yellow, and red, that you could see on one page all the results, not in hard numbers, but in color. And of course, the underlying numbers were there, but for a management decision, for a judgment how good or how bad a certain group is dealing with the roadmap, colors are good enough. That's what I mean, do a little bit of mapping. Make it easy to understand what this is all about. In fact, the traffic light system is also a result of that. How are we sure that all your activities are contributing sufficiently to our bottom line, for instance? And whether they deliver sufficient sustainability results to stay number 1 in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. That was the reason to limit this discussion to design this portfolio with the 4 segments, with the 4 areas where you had a positive correlation between sustainability and money, and negative correlation between sustainability and money, or vice versa, or double minus. Each activity, each main project was being mapped. So most of the projects should be in the, as you remember, in the upper right corner. you can represent each project by an arrow. The arrow should point in the right direction, and the length of the arrow should give an indication how important this activity is. And inside the block, you can still see there are vectors pointing and closer to the sustainability axis, and the ones closer to the money axis. And if you have this, you can see whether this is a balanced portfolio. And if top management feel that you have a balanced portfolio, that means that the amount of questions you get, or the other way around, the trust you're getting and the credibility you're getting is increasing enormously. So this was a portfolio way of describing the portfolio, which was helpful and giving insight for ourselves and to set the priority. It was also great stuff to report to the highest management what we are doing. That's mapping. We also already came across the mapping of the eco-value in product portfolios. This is, if you do it in an improper way, the best methods to make product managers mad. Because you compare environmental impact, that's your domain, and price, that's their domain. Suppose that you do a good job on the environmental impact side, and you can demonstrate that the pricing of the product is unbalanced. And that's basically what you do. Because within a certain category, you should have a constant ratio or a ratio which is changing according to things like screen size or sound quality of system. But if this is inconsistent, then you can show something is not wrong. It's not okay. Well, we had a student, as I told you, doing this. And when this diagram was presented to the product managers for the first time, and this was a pretty, well, I loved him, but it was a pretty aggressive student, but he made the product managers mad. So after this experience, I turned the other way around and say, okay, suppose that you do it. And the first thing you should do is that you don't look at your own product lineup, but you compare with the competition. Then you can see where you're charging too high prices or where you're charging too low prices. And that gives maybe an explanation why some of our products sell so well, although we did not expect this, and others don't. This was very helpful. They took it on board. They considered it as their own invention, and there you go. And in fact, this is another example where sustainability considerations contribute to issues which go far beyond the domain of eco itself. External. Do a little bit of mapping. Subcontracting. Negotiating a big subcontracting contract in China. You can, of course, look at all the items like price, quantities the organization can handle, number of rejects in their production line as they report it to you. What you also can do is compare different subcontractors on the basis of these subjective elements, which mostly derive from the social and the societal domain, partly also from the environmental domain. So rate with pluses and minuses the amount of order in the factory, or the amount of chaos in the factory, the amount of order in the logistics department, or the amount of chaos in the logistics department. How clean are the toilets? How good or how bad do the dormitories look like? Is there smell in the factory? Is there a problem? Is the food in the canteen bad? And so on and so forth. You can't imagine how important this is and how much useful clues this kind of things is giving to select the right subcontractor. And if you say this, well, people buy into this argument, yes or no. But if you have a nice diagram comparing the different subcontractors with pluses and minuses for the various aspects, and you have a total net score, your credibility increases enormously, and by the way, also the efficiency of the meetings. This is a great trick to do. It lacks scientific preciseness, but from a managerial perspective, this is a great thing to do, because management is also about trust. It's also about credibility. It's a subjective judgment how things are. Story 16. Mapping of negotiations for a big contract. Well, if you're negotiating for a big contract, you can do mapping too. And that is mapping of the needs iceberg of the opposite party. What is a need iceberg? When you're going into a negotiation, you have certain needs. Some needs are more important than others. There is a priority in your needs, but the opposite party has needs as well. But part of the needs they tell to you, but there are a lot of other needs. Maybe there are needs which are hidden for you for whatever reason. Therefore, I use the metaphor of an iceberg, because in an iceberg you see only 10%, because 10% is above the water level, 90% is below. And this 90% is therefore representing the most important chunk of the total iceberg. So talk about their needs, but also try to find out what their hidden needs are. And try to track them down and talk as long until the moment you get a better idea. And then you can start mapping, because you know your priorities. You know by now, through asking and through talking, their priorities, and see whether there's a match. If their top priority is the same as your ones, it will be difficult. If their priority is a completely different one than yours, you can exchange. If you do the best things, or the ones for me which were on the top of my priority list, and I do some concessions through which I can enable you to realize your top priorities, then we can be both relatively happy. That is what I learned about negotiations in China. But you can employ these kind of negotiations also in negotiations about sustainability, either in negotiations within quotation marks with your top management, in your negotiations with external stakeholders, or in your negotiations with your subcontractors, which have to do something for you in the sustainability field. So here it's the reverse. For the sustainability field, I learned something about earlier negotiations with subcontractors when I was still a businessman. I think this is a valuable lesson because it shows that sustainability is not a standalone. There is it can have a big impact on business in general and also reversely. Conclusions of this lecture, key message: be a human being, be yourself. Trust and credibility are essential for a successful sustainability manager. Top management to be handled on basis of opportunities and successes. Social dimension, being human and consistent, pays. Economic dimension, do a little bit of mapping. It will help you.